All right, ready? And the meeting is now started. Let's do a roll call.
L. Jordan, not here yet. Lonegro, here. Roth,
Here.
Shearer, not here yet. Sturtons,
Here.
Warshaw,
Here.
thank you.
All right, first up is public comments. We will now begin the regularly scheduled portion. Do we have any online submissions? Did we have any in-person submissions? Then I am not going to read you all about public comments. Moving on, superintendent's report.
Oh, wow. So quick. Well, welcome everybody. This week, I believe it was this week on the 14th, well actually it was Saturday. It was a very special day. If you're not aware, November 15th annually is School Board Members Day. And for all the volunteerism that these team members do here, they only get 1 day of recognition. Can you believe that? But it is a special day in which we recognize the commitment and hard work of our Skokie 68 board members. Just as I mentioned, each board member devotes countless hours to volunteerism for the community, as well as to you as students, staff, and parents. I want to just say thank you for everything from policy development to looking at some of the long-term plans as well as some of the short-term. We're going to talk tonight about strategic planning. All of that is part of the puzzle that helps our students learn and ideally helps support our staff. And the board has been incredibly committed to that and very supportive of our efforts along the way. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you and acknowledgement for November 15th being School Board Members Day. We do have a small token of appreciation for all of your hard work. There's also an opportunity if you would like to send a message to the board as a whole. Their website is available online. It's boardmembers@skokie68.org, and that will be received by all the board members. So don't hesitate to share your positive feedback. Hopefully you saw the Parent Square message. We also had a lovely message from our board president, Annie Warshaw, just thanking everybody for the hard work that goes into being a board member. So just a quick round of applause for our board members. I have the next one as well. I've got the strategic plan update. I'm going to go ahead and use the podium for that for you tonight. So very exciting week. We kicked off strategic planning. I am ironically standing here in front of the current strategic plan. It has 5 key goal areas listed there, and they are very comprehensive and appropriately designed for a school district of this type. We focus on cultural responsiveness, equity, inclusion, SEL and the whole child, teaching and learning, facilities and safety, and last but not least, communication and engagement. One of the unique elements to our current strategic plan are the objectives. Welcome, we're just started. We have 41 objectives listed in our current strategic plan. That is a lot. The new plan will likely have less, but will likely touch on many of the similar topics. But before we talk about that, I did want to just spend a minute on some of the progress to date that I really can't take credit for because a lot of this was accomplished before I joined this amazing school district. But just for an example, continuing to explore green initiative options to continue to reduce the district's carbon footprint. This doesn't mean this will go away, but I just want to highlight the uniqueness of our district and what has been done here. We have actual geothermal heating and air conditioning at Devonshire, at Devonshire, Highland, and now at the ECC. That's a very innovative and unique opportunity for us. We'll continue to report out on the outcomes of that work along the way. Several classrooms at OOGH will benefit from that as well in the actual ECC build-out, those that are directly connected. And we're looking at possibly opportunities down the road to expand that. We also have solar panels established and installed on the new ECC. That was just approved at a recent board meeting, so that's very exciting. So we'll also be sharing back the outcomes from that. Obviously, we need a roof before we can put on the solar panels on said roof. But there is one developing along the way, and hopefully you've seen that progress. One of the other objectives was to assess and adjust the communication strategies to provide relevant and timely information. So we rolled out the new website this year. We also rolled out Parent Square. Majority of the feedback has been very positive with both of those, so we're excited to hear and see some of that progress along the way. Several items are ongoing, as mentioned a minute ago, and you'll see a little bit tonight. Utilizing data is something that is an ongoing practice in the district. You'll hear more from Dr. Sam Majedny as it relates to our economic growth and achievement. And you'll also hear some financial data this evening as well. And then next door, the new Early Childhood Center facility has really come a long way in the last 3 weeks. You can see real great examples of the progress. We also have a wonderful team working on the development of a Build 68. Well, build with a D, being the D for D68, a little pun there. We'll have a section on the website established soon that has photos of some of the projects that have been completed, as well as the work in progress. We were able to engage our early childhood students to put their hands in paint and to decorate some of the I-beams before they were brought up on the Early Childhood Center. Who doesn't want to do that? But we also have some opportunities to continue to focus. And a lot of these items will probably reemerge within the planning along the way. One of the reasons we selected this particular partner to help us with the plan is that they do support the development of building what's called a profile of a graduate. And we are anticipating something similar to that, if not exactly that, coming out of our strategic planning efforts now. And then also providing professional development on equity, inclusion, and diversity to strengthen relationships with students and families. We've done some work in this area, but I anticipate additional work coming forth within the existing strategic plan, but also the new strategic plan as well. So a lot of work taking place in some of these areas, but I think increased focus is anticipated with the new plan. So back in June, we recommended that we find a partner to help us lead this work and to really do an authentic and deep dive throughout this year to make the strategic plan something that's long-lasting, realistic, authentic, and the outcome of a lot of collaboration. So we've been working with Studer, and we've developed a timeline. We've got a few dates for engagement. We had a steering committee meeting on the 17th of this week to kick off a lot of that work. They've helped us out with this wonderful timeline, and I just want to point out 2 or 3 quick items from this. One of the things that's unique about this provider is that this only shows the current year. They're actually going to be with us for this year as well as next year. And next year, one of their objectives will be to support us with the rollout and the implementation of the plan. So they don't just help build it and then dip out. They stick around. They coach us. They work with team members. They work with the administration. They help support me so that it becomes a real plan and so that everyone can feel like a mirror to the plan and that their work shows up and that their input is actually honored. One of the unique things they do to help start that work, and you'll see in about January, we'll roll out our actual surveys for the strategic plan feedback. And most of these processes that you've seen or been a part of, you get feedback, you build the plan, you say thank you for the feedback, and you roll out the plan. One of the things that I like about Studer is they will gather feedback, the committee will help build the plan, then we bring that draft back to the community as a whole, staff, some student involvement, and obviously parents and community members, to see and gain feedback. Is this the plan that you hope to see? What's missing? What do you like? What's in this that you gave feedback on earlier? And I think the closing of that loop, as they refer to it, is a really helpful process for our next several years to feel heard, validated, and then also seen in the plan as it rolls out. So we're at sort of the tail end of these dates. So like I mentioned, January for the surveys, and then a little bit at the end of each one of those months along the way, with the goal having the new strategic plan before the end of this school year, which is very, very exciting. Kind of went through most of this already, but just at a high level, their focus is to really gather and then do the analysis with the committee. We sort of shape that and do some work with values. We've already looked at some analysis of like the mission statement and the vision and the values that we have as a school district to see how we may be able to focus in on some of those. And then eventually the board will approve the actual strategic plan. So it'll be an action item on a board meeting. I'll be doing another one of these presentations in February and anecdotally share an update along the way. But there will be a formal agenda item that gets voted upon. They are taking a lot of the weight off of us in a good way in terms of some of the logistical pieces with survey development, but we are giving feedback and they've been a wonderful partner. Just this week, we provided all of the top 20 languages that are spoken in our school district, and they're going to work with us to make sure that those languages are incorporated into the survey. That's a typical part of their procedures, but another reason why we selected them to work with. We're also going to be able to incorporate a few questions related to the audit that we conducted in May of last year. So I think it'll really support that work. And I know the teachers put a lot of hard work in developing work samples from the auditors. So it won't be in vain. We'll actually be able to share that with the community in certain ways to see if that feedback can lead to even more input and focus. Really articulated already most of this, I believe. But we'll do some advertising of the survey. We'll try to get creative. We've talked about developing even flyers to hand out even in like local restaurants if they'll allow us to throw them in the foyer to really help make sure we get as much feedback as we can, not just from our current parents and staff, but also from community members as a whole. And then we talked already about board approval. We'll definitely be celebrating this process when it's done. But it really won't be over. It's meant to be ongoing and it's meant to be authentic and developed along the way. And that's something that they also have been really focused on reminding us as well, so that it's not checking it off the list, but it's continuously improving throughout the process. We have a wonderful committee that is formed. We have Jeremy and Emily from the board who are helping us out at a board level, and myself, Kenya, Christy, and Elisa Leperini from the ESC. Greg Hansen has been roped into this process, kicking and screaming. We have a number of team members from our Education Association, Lisa Goico and Laura Sullivan. Tried to really be intentional about some representation from the different schools throughout the district. Our teaching assistant team members, Edgar Estella and Graham Sharma from Stenson and Devonshire. We have two parents, Dr. Perry as well as Ms. Simon from OOJH, previously OOJH, most recently, and now at Niles North. And then Ms. Simon has children at Highland. And then we also have a community partner, Mr. Richard Kwong. He's the executive director at the Skokie Public Library. They are also going through strategic planning. They're a little ahead of us in their timeline, so it's been helpful also to hear some of their feedback and input along the way. Like I mentioned, we met this week. We meet again in February, and there will be others likely. Our executive team, which is like our administrative leadership team, also met this week with Studer. We'll meet again in January, and then April, if not more. And then focus groups will kick off in January, which is a little after the window for when we anticipate the survey, which is likely to roll out January 5th if all things go as planned. Any questions about the strategic plan? I spoke fast and furiously, but hopefully it was helpful and gave you a comprehensive update. Any questions at all? Awesome. Appreciate it. Really excited. It's going really well. Studer's been a wonderful partner. We hope that the elongated process, while seemingly a bit slow, leads to a really authentic feel so that everyone can see, like I said, see themselves in the plan and the next steps along the way. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I think I have the next one too.
Yeah, you do.
All right, here we go.
And it's a doozy, so buckle up, everyone.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, here we go. Important dates. A lot coming on, a lot coming up.
It's all the foil. Oh,
Hold on, here we go, yep.
I thought it was the foil time.
October was still, I think, busier, believe it or not. But November 26th to 28th is our Thanksgiving recess, no school. Tuesday, December 9th, report cards will be available, I believe that date, on the parent portal. Tuesday, December 16th is our elementary orchestra concert. Wednesday, December 17th is OJH choral concert. Thursday, December 18th is our December board meeting. Looking a little bit further ahead, the Monday, December 22nd is the first day of winter break, no school. We have January 5th Teacher Institute. That's the Monday in which years past we've come back to school. So that will be a no student attendance day. And then school resumes from winter break on Tuesday, January 6th. There were a few other concerts and dates within there. Not to shortchange those dates, but admittedly I did not have all of those details in front of me at the time. But I know there's a few other music-related events that are super exciting within the schools also. Last but not least,
Now
we
buckle up.
had 7 FOIAs. There were 7 requests and responses for information under the Freedom of Information Act during the period of October 11th through November 13th, 2025. On September 29th, 2025, the district received a commercial request from
Sherry Reed.
from Data Acquisition Specialist requesting purchase order and vendor information. The response was sent on October 28th. October 14th, the district received a request from Bo Kim from unionbid.com requesting bid results tabulations in which bidder was awarded the project for the Skokie School District Early Learning Center Edition Photovoltaic Solar System Project. That's what it's called. The response was sent on October 21st, 2025. October 16th, 2025, the district received a request from Yuran Zhang from SEIU Local 1 requesting copies of documents related to the district's food services and custodial services. The response was sent on October 23rd. October 20th, the district received a request from Stephen Richards, LTD, from law offices of Stephen L. Richards, LTD, requesting any and all of his student records from approximately 1959 to possibly 1961. Response sent October 27th. October 21st, 2025, the district received a request from Steve Watts from Angleton, Texas, requesting records of all current employees at Skokie School District 68, specifically for full legal name, job title or role, official work site or campus, and current salary. The response was sent on October 28th. October 21, the district received a request from Brian Gavelin from Illinois Education Association, requesting the names of all non-certified staff employed by Skokie School District 68. Job titles, data hire, current rate of pay, work building and address, number of hours scheduled or work per week, number of hours they have scheduled per year, collective bargaining unit, and identity and services provided of any subcontracted companies currently engaged in district support staff work. The response was sent October 28th. November 3rd, the district received a request from Christy Agrawal requesting son's social work records. The response is pending.
The next item of business are board updates. Our updates will be organized into 2 categories, liaisons and committees. We may not always have an update based on timing of meetings and events, but we'll continue to revisit these items at board meetings. So for liaisons, we have Ed Red first. Emily?
Okay, there's a lot of things happening legislatively. We had a bunch of events and it's been kind of dormant for a few months, so now we're ready to go. Our General Assembly reconvened on October 14th and had some big wins on transit and immigration enforcement and energy storage, but no major education legislation advanced at all. So that should probably come back in the spring session. We'll be all over that. We did have some legislative highlights that Ed Red wanted to share. There was a Senate Bill 243 about FOIA requests, which is pretty great, where it creates a 5-day human verification period so that bots can't just send these FOIA requests and inundate us with extra work. So that passed unanimously in the Senate and is waiting signature, and if it gets signed, it should be in place January 1. So only have 1.5 more months of suffering of bots taking FOIAs. There's also there's another House bill that affects us that passed the Senate and House waiting signature. It allows elected officials to have personal information removed from public websites and databases, just because safety is a rising concern for people who are elected. We also have some pension reform at Senate Bill 1937. If you want to get in the weeds, look it up. I'm not going to bore you with all that. It just adjusts the retirement age and cost of living expense increases. It won't be passed during this legislative session, so it might come back in the spring and I'll let you know if that happens. But we went to a really fun kickoff
Yeah,
breakfast
great.
on October 20th, and it was awesome. And EdRed debuted their big 3 initiatives for this school year. And one of them is the world language graduation requirement flexibility, which doesn't really apply to us. It's more high school, but it's cool. Recognizing that language proficiency isn't one tunnel that everybody needs to go down. We need to recognize that people have language proficiency from other areas of life, and it's a pretty cool thing. And we're looking at career and alternative pathways counting toward graduation requirements. Anyway, very cool for high school, but it does affect how we prepare our kids for high school, which is kind of our whole thing. There is some mandated funding, which is really excited for mandates. So because there is a whole bill that's like about mandates that has like 17,000 mandates attached to it. So I think they're being cheeky, but a lot of the things that they are trying to mandate, like transportation, special ed, bilingual, truancy prevention, is all just mandated and chronically underfunded. So this will mandate the funding for mandates. We'll see. So they're trying to make sure that these things are funded, which is nice. So they're advocating for full and consistent funding, especially after we don't have any more ESSER money and times have changed. They were also asking for us, and I don't know if I sent this to you, but they're asking us to share transportation costs and all this specific data with them so they can do a big study. Okay, just so you know. And they're also, so language requirements, mandated funding, and then law enforcement procedures off campus. And there are a lot of things that they're outlining. It says the current school code outlines procedures only for on-campus law enforcement, so we need to talk about what happens with off-campus with our students. So that's an ongoing discussion and a priority for this school year. We had a pretty cool panel of some people that we know. Dr. Soye from 219 was there, previous superintendent. Andre Torres, who is the Deputy Governor for Education under Pritzker, was there. Representative Will Davis, who's like a regular at events, and Senator Adrienne Johnson, who's awesome, and I've met a bunch of times. She's the Environment and Conservation and the former Ed Chair, so she has a lot of expertise. And they had a great discussion, a very real, which I was kind of impressed with. It was a very real, down-to-earth, brass tacks discussion. And what I left from that was, when we think about our legislator and we're like, do something, they're doing a lot, okay? We just don't know about all of it. And they're working relentlessly. And the 4 big areas that they covered in that talk, I recorded it, by the way. I have a transcript. Don't tell them that I did it. Because they weren't recording it, so I wanted to remember. They talked a lot about people and about our teacher vacancy pipeline. We talked a little bit about that in strategic planning, where they were reflecting on their ability to hire like 1,000 educators in the state, and they're continuing to grow our pipeline and our pathway to teacher certification. We talked a lot about trying to increase the budget from $350 million to $550 million for the evidence-based funding. We've heard that for many years, so we're still trying to get that done. But I feel like they talked about the ongoing federal volatility makes it really hard for us to do that because we're trying to diversify our funds to make sure nobody slips through the cracks. We talked a lot about student and staff mental health, which we also talked about in our strategic planning session. And we also talked about the future guidance from ISB on AI, which is planned for the next school year, which will be interesting to see what they come up with. And also being ready for the future, like extending CTE and industry partnerships to give kids more options. And not just college is the only choice, but there are lots of other interesting careers to be prepared for. So I think we're going to have a pretty, don't love this word, but robust year and an interesting year legislatively. We have a meeting coming up. Let's see. Then we had a big legislative briefing, which pretty much talked about all the same things I just talked about. And our next member meeting is on December 5th. So if you're really interested, talk to me on December 6th. I'll tell you all about it. I have 6 pages of notes. There's a lot more I didn't talk about, but it's fun to watch what's going on.
Awesome. Next is IASB, which is Jeremy's. And we were all supposed to review but it was unanimous.
It was unanimous.
Yes.
And
We
it's
all
on the
agreed
agenda.
on all of them, so we don't have to tell you all because nothing's changing, nothing's happening, but there's the resolutions that IASB put out. Nothing actually happens from them. It's just, hey, this is what we recommend. Do you agree or disagree? We all aligned on what they had already said. So that's our vote there. Next is NTDSC with Jill.
Yes, it's been a while since I've been there. For administrative reports, we discussed the classroom space, their lack of it, the continued discussion that we're having with them, and the pause and discussion. Next, we talked about some strategic plan updates, kind of what you just said, Emily. What they're working on doing is having some paraprofessionals that are currently working there through continuing ed, having them go and get a teaching degree. So that they can continue their education and stay within the system. They're working on a 4-year plan for that, and they're in the final year. Sorry, they're working on that. And then for their strategic plan, they're in the final year of the 4-year plan of their current strategic plan. I can share more information with that, but I won't bore everyone in this meeting. For historical information, I know that we've discussed this multiple times. In 2020, we started with 39 students from District 68, and there was out of 239 that were in the NTDSC enrollment. And currently, we have 78 students enrolled out of 347. And I believe, if I'm reading this correctly, in the 2019-2020 school year, we had 1,692 students. And so 39 of them in September went to NTDSC, and at the end of the year, 41, so we added 2 more. And then we currently have 1,660 and a half students, 0.5.
It's a long story.
It's like that, the nuclear family. And like I said, we have currently 78 students enrolled with NTDSC. We also discussed the extended school year proposal. Basically, school for them ends on June 3rd. They're looking at having the extended school year start on June 10th for an orientation, adding 17 extra school days, and ending July 2nd. That would be at their building, and then they also had an offshoot that they were looking at discussing. We also discussed the CFC committee, which we will discuss later after this. What else? A bunch of activities that they had. They had an arts event on the 23rd of October. They also had Fall Fest that was on the 23rd. They do a Special Olympics with the NTDSC students and satellite students. And then they also have the Raptors basketball team. They have a Spirit Wear online store. So there's like a bud around me, sorry. Very exciting. They were working on parent-teacher conferences. What else? Nothing else. Oh, one more thing is their contract extension for transportation. They've been discussing with North Shore Transit contract negotiations, and their final decision will be made at the December meeting. I think there was one other really important thing I wanted to mention. Currently for curriculum, they are using FastBridge. They previously used Ames, and they're looking to go back to that and doing a web pilot. So
Thank you.
a jumble, but that's what we got.
We don't have any updates for collective bargaining. The collaborative for curriculum, do we have anything, Ms. Roth?
For curriculum?
No, the collaborative for curriculum.
Not this time.
Not yet? Okay.
We do.
We do?
Well, we had that meeting back
The-
on October 20th.
Yes,
Tell us about it.
it was
It was
basically-
very fascinating. This is our first time sitting in on this in this group. I haven't looked at these notes in a while.
I can.
Yeah, if you wanna-
I can DJ for you a little
Yeah.
bit. So one of the things I thought was really interesting is the monitoring of progress that the collaborative for curriculum is doing as it relates to different programmatic experiences. So they've done a really great job disaggregating students by grade, but also by experience to really measure the effectiveness of their educational experience, which I thought was really impressive given the amount of students that are involved. It's a very organized group. There's a really strong, structured approach to making sure that the amount of funding that they're investing has an outcome to it. I'm impressed by just a few initial experiences. I will say that Dr. Schmidt, Dr. Samajedny, and myself have had a few administrative meetings as well, and each one of those is equally very organized and structured, and I've been just overall very impressed by the whole process so far. I feel like we're early in our relationship, so we're still just sort of learning a little bit more about it, but administratively, a lot of our conversations have been about summer programming, opportunities for resource optimization, even opportunities down the road possibly for alignment and support of one another within and across different schools. So overall, very positive so far, but very early. Not a whole ton of like shifts per se in practice, but interesting to see and learn more about what could be becoming down the road.
It was very interesting just to see how they structured the data points of their curriculum. And that there was a massive, I think it was in math, in that fourth grade, the math and reading,
Yeah.
because the state had updated their expectations of the students,
Yeah.
and then they're gonna be switching it back.
Yeah.
But it was like, the numbers were really like crazy. There was, you know, all different colors and all this, and like the fourth graders, those poor children were really just hit by bricks of like what their expectations were. And so in the grand scheme of things, it looks like they aren't learning anything, but their goalpost is just extended so much compared to where, you know, kindergarten through third and then back to fifth and then through eighth. And so it's kind of a blip in a radar, hopefully, in that it'll self-correct within the upcoming years.
Is that last year's fourth grade or this?
It's since for the past few years,
Oh, okay.
I feel like.
So fourth grade's just been like a weird.
The data points for how the students are succeeding in reading and math drops as like a lot.
It looks like it, but it really the measures of.
So yes,
Okay.
but then they pick back up. They pick back up into fifth grade, and then we were also talking about the summer program that they have, and how the children that are in the CFC summer, what do they call it? Summer leap program are so much ahead of the national average of students when they come into the following school year, like leaps and bounds. Like some, I could pull it up later. Some of them were like 120% success rates versus just like the national average. So we also discussed communicating with parents earlier about the necessity of children going to a summer leap type program before the Skokie Park District camps come out, just making sure, because as you know, as that comes out, parents have already made a lot of plans for summer, and so we also, knowing that we're not going to be joining the program probably this year, have discussed hopefully getting our feet a little bit wet in the communication with parents when it comes to signing up for summer school, extended summer leap, whatever we call it, prior to camp sign up.
Traditionally, fourth grade is that year.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty expected that their fourth graders would have the same challenges that fourth graders across schools face.
So is that data like 120% prepared or whatever? Is that because they're just in school? Oh, they're learning,
Okay.
or is the program itself is so amazing?
So, can I share this?
I don't know.
Can I?
I think just verbally
Okay,
for now.
so, for example, third grade, math, the national average of like summer slip is, they go down negative 0.94%, so about 1%. Anyone who's in the CFC program and does not do summer school, they're at a 0.32 average growth. And the summer LEAP program kids are at a 1.09.
Oh, so it's both.
So you're from negative 0.94 all the way to 1.09. For 8th grade, it was negative 1.81 national average. For the children that just do CFC no summer, it was a 0.24, and it was a 0.98. So that's still over 100, almost 100, or almost 200%. And then 4th grade was the only one that was below the average. The national average was negative 1.53, and with the summer LEAP, it was negative 1.96, and no summer school but CFC was negative 2.28. So that was the only one. And then for reading, 3rd grade national average was a boost of 1.05, but with the summer LEAP program, it was 2.81. 4th grade was much better, a negative 0.45, and with the summer LEAP program, 2.73. That was the average growth and loss. That's what's expected over summer.
Thank you.
Should mention they're using NWA because the current partner schools utilize NWA. So we have iReady, but I know Dr. Schmidt and Dr. Samajeni have already been working with the 219 team to calibrate for our iReady data. Because one of the things that the team is articulating here is that the 219 team does a great job of showing growth across cohorts so that it is following the same students. So we can definitely work to bring that data back once we have it, but right now we're not even in it, literally, the data's not us. But I think it'll be interesting to see, next fall, I guess you could say, or thereafter where we're at. So, yeah.
All right, and then last, the strategic plan committee. Emily, you're back up.
Well, I think Scott did a pretty good recap of what we've done.
Just wanted to make sure you didn't want to contribute anything
We had a
else.
really long meeting, and I was late, but it was awesome, and I thought our facilitator was fantastic. He had the command of the room, he had a wonderful voice, he was really fun and funny.
It wasn't
felt
me.
like it wasn't Scott, and it felt like he kind of went with the flow of what we all wanted to talk about within his structure, and I'm just excited about it. I'm glad to be a part of it. I really like strategic planning, and I feel everybody there was a balanced amount of commentary. I think everyone participated.
Yeah.
I'm feeling really excited to see what those surveys look like. The last time I was a parent, a volunteer. I think I was like one of 2 parents that volunteered the last strategic planning thing, which got me interested in doing this anyway because I love that kind of stuff. And it was just great to hear everybody's voices. I thought we were being pretty inclusive, and the last survey data was, to me, really murky and kind of could be interpreted in lots of different ways. So I love seeing a good survey, and I'm excited to see what they come up with. That's the land, Dan.
All right. Anything else from anybody? Okay. The next item of business is approval of minutes. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from October 16th, 2025, Board of Education regular meeting.
Second?
Jordan,
Yes.
Bondigrow,
Yes.
Roth,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Sturman,
Yes.
Workshop.
Yes. All right, the consent agenda is our next item of business. The consent agenda includes the personnel report covering employee hires and resignations as posted with the agenda for this meeting, financial reports, which includes fund balances for September 2025, and the statement of position report, pay orders and expenditures, which includes accounts payable, statement of cash flow, and the P-card monthly report, payroll report, Illinois school report card, and policy second readings. Does any board member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, may I have a motion and a roll call vote to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented by the board president.
Second.
Bondigrow,
Yes.
Roth,
Yes.
Shear,
Yes.
Sturman,
Yes.
Workshop,
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
The next item of business is informational reports and discussion items. Superintendent Grenz will provide us with an introduction and next steps. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have an update for you this evening on our financial forecasts and projections. This is a typical annual item that we provide. Kenya Austin has been working with an outside financial consultant, Dr. Rob Grossi. Rob is from Illuminate. It's a financial consulting firm that works specifically with Illinois school districts. And I'll let Kenya handle the introduction, but Rob, can you hear us okay?
I can you hear me?
Awesome, yep. Before Rob jumps on, unfortunately he couldn't join us in person, he's on vacation, I think it shows his dedication here. He's gonna do a great job making this information digestible for all of you, so I will hand it over to Kenya to hand it over to Rob.
I'm gonna tell you, me and Rob met when I worked at ISB on a financial oversight panel taking over a district. But he's also been in education for a very, very long time and just recently retired as the Bloom Township Treasurer. Rob, 30 years?
40.
40 years. 21, 25. You started in 25? When you was 25?
23 years old.
23 years old, he started as a Bloom
Thanks for
Township.
calling out my age, I appreciate it.
He recently retired in June, and he has been a great supporter of education. He's written legislation, he's helped with formulas, calculations, and he always speaks all over the state about education funding. So I will let him introduce him even more, and then we'll get started with the presentation today.
Thank you, Kenya. Good evening, everybody. And I apologize for not being there. I would have much rather been there.
He's in Florida, y'all. He don't want to be.
Yeah, I've been working with school districts for a lot of years. I have been appointed by the State Board of Education a couple times when they've taken over school districts that have had financial challenges. I work only in Illinois, but we work with a lot of school districts in Illinois. In your neighborhood, we work closely right now with Park Ridge Niles 64, and for the last year and a half or so, we've been doing a lot of work over at Evanston 65. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share my screen, or try to share my screen here.
We're gonna first discuss the financial projection, the 5-year plan, and Rob is a great asset for this because Cook County is a different world right now. Tax bills didn't go out in time, but they went out on the 15th. Thank you, God. I appreciate that. So that was a little scary and very financially burdened for some districts in the state. They did have to borrow because of that. Luckily, we did not have to, but that was a discussion when we first talked. And he's able to help me smooth line some of those discussions because he's been in the talks with the state, and I thought he would be a valuable asset for those type of discussions here.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
No, did you share it already? No.
I thought I did.
All right, hold on. Let me
I'm gonna try it there.
All right, try it now. There we go. We can see it.
I just gotta make it bigger.
There you go.
Okay, great. So, I'm gonna do I spent a lot of time over the last month or so, met with the superintendent, met with Kenya several times, get a flavor of the school district. I took a close look at your audit, your budget, and what I'm gonna put together is kind of my independent assessment of the district's current financial condition and what I see as its future financial condition and possible challenges. So to begin, I'm going to start with a quick analysis of the district's financial history. This graph, can you see this graph?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this graph tracks your revenues and expenditures over the past 9 years, excluding major capital activity. During this time period, your revenues grew at a rate of 3.4% on an annual basis, and expenditures grew at 4.4% on an average annual basis. So expenditures grew at about 1% higher at an average rate than revenues. When you put the revenues and expenditures together, this is a comparison of revenues minus expenditures, so your operational essentially surplus or deficit. So your district has kind of a funky pattern around a balanced budget A lot of the ups and downs are due to COVID. There were some unique timing of expenses and revenues during the COVID years and post-COVID years. And also, you do your accounting basis as accrual. And in Cook County, that creates some odd patterns often with real estate taxes because Cook County tax collection dates vary so significantly. So they may come in one year, not the other, and the timing is not consistent. But essentially, you've hovered, pretty close around that balanced budget. Over the last 10 years, over the last 9 years, revenues have exceeded expenditures in the aggregate by $12 million. And then in addition to the kind of structural surplus deficit, the other thing that impacts fund balances is major capital investment. And although the district invests a lot of capital between 2017 and 21, it has picked up capital investment over the last several years. During the 9-year projection historical period I analyzed, the district spent a little over $42 million in major capital, using about $25 million in bond proceeds and $17.4 million in fund balance reserves. District's fund balance reserves have been healthy during the projection period, hovering close to 600 days most of that time period. But you could see that with the conscious effort to use capital investment, drawing down fund balance reserves, which school districts that have healthy fund balance reserves tend to do, your fund balance reserves have dropped from a peak of 641 days down to about 372 days worth of reserves. The black line that I have on this graph, this represents 180 days worth of reserves. This is the minimum level that the state would like to see a school district at in order to receive the highest financial profile score on their rubric that assesses financial health of the school district. And then the other thing that I look at for a school district is their outstanding debt and outstanding non-referendum debt. So this is basically your credit card ability to borrow money. And the district is very little amount of debt. I believe that their philosophy of borrowing short term for capital, and then once the bonds mature, issuing debt to issue the next round of capital. Capital is a very prudent way to keep tax rates level and to address your capital needs. So the district at this moment in time could have an annual tax levy, which is the black line, of about $3.5 million per year for the next 20 years. And right now the district is a little below $3 million for the next 4 years, and then it's debt free. So the district has a considerable amount of borrowing authority if necessary. So the next section is going to talk about a general concern that I have for all school districts in Illinois. Because I'm old, as Kenya pointed out, I've seen a lot of, I've seen very distinct patterns in school districts. I was around when I was working with many school districts because the state was underfunding them and prorating their payments. They had to go to the bank and borrow money just to pay for teacher salaries to cover payrolls. That was pretty prevalent at one point in time. I will say probably over the last 7 years, it's probably been the greatest financial time for school districts in Illinois. The district enacted this new evidence-based funding formula, which pumped several $1 billion of new funding to schools, primarily those schools that were considered underfunded in their formula, not necessarily Skokie, they got very little of it, and the school around you. The CPI rate of inflation was at historical highs, which is good for school districts in terms of capturing revenues. COVID provided a one-time stimulus money and generally brought down expenses when schools were operating virtually. So altogether, everything lined up pretty well for schools. And if you took a snapshot of schools right now, just looking at fund balance reserves and whether they're running surpluses and deficits, it's pretty clear that schools are at, or most schools are at or near their best financial shape at this moment in time. The counter to that, however, is I think that the next several years are going to be extremely challenging, because everything that was positive over the last 7 years, I believe is going to start to unwind. First of all, in terms of local sources, most school districts in Illinois and all school districts in Cook and DeKalb counties, their real estate taxes can grow by the rate of inflation. They could get more for new taxable property, but generally rate of inflation. So between the 2022 and 2024 levy year, inflation, that rate was 4.47%. But in the 10 years prior to that, the average rate of inflation was 1.75%. And right now CPI is trending back down toward the pre-COVID levels. In terms of corporate personal property taxes, the state of Illinois Department of Revenue made a mistake, overfunded schools in 2022 and 23, and now they're drawing that money all the way back down. So corporate personal property taxes have dropped significantly for all schools. And then interest rates which also have become a really relevant source of revenues, is now starting to decline as the Federal Reserve is starting to make decisions to lower rates. On the state source challenges, and this is the one I'm probably most concerned about, if you look at that top graph, in the 20 years between 2001 and 2020, the state of Illinois only had one balanced budget. That was in 2007. Other than that, they had deficits, and they covered those deficits by borrowing money and not paying bills. In fact, in 2020, the state of Illinois owed about $6 to $8 billion in outstanding bills. They were paying several $100 million in late fees. The hospitals weren't being paid, higher education wasn't being paid, and schools were being prorated. At that moment in time, 2020, I received a call from the State Board of Ed asking me to calculate what it would look like if they cut funding by over 30%. And it would have cost a district like Skokie a little over $1,100 per pupil to cover that reduction. Then COVID hit. And from a financial lens, obviously COVID had a lot of bad implications, but from a financial lens, it was very helpful to a lot of schools and also was very helpful to the state of Illinois. So once COVID hit, if you look at the graph at the bottom, the district went from these multi-billion-dollar deficits and it actually had $2 to $4 billion surpluses in 23, 24, and then a balanced budget in 25. But now the state is entering what many are calling as a fiscal cliff. And even the governor's office, management and budget, they're projecting deficits to go back down to the $4 or $5 billion range. If that happens again, the state's going to have challenges which could bleed down to schools throughout the state in many different ways. This is a graph of the main source of revenues that schools get. It used to be called general state aid, now it's called evidence-based funding. So you could see from 2006 to 2017, basically, the state of Illinois did not increase funding to schools. It was pretty flat. And people that just started becoming business managers over the last 5 to 7 years can't even comprehend that could happen, because since then, evidence-based funding has grown by 300 to 350 million, the formula of $300 million a year, every year, starting in 2018, other than 2021. So right now, it costs the state of Illinois $4 billion more just to fund the evidence-based funding formula than it did 10 years ago. and without the benefit of the $6 to $8 billion they received in ESSER grant money, which helped to pay off their debt and increase evidence-based funding, there are people who are questioning whether the state's gonna continue to have revenue sources to fund education the way it's currently funding. And for a district like Skokie, if they keep funding flat, that's not relevant to Skokie, because you really don't get any new money from the state. The challenge I see for Skokie would be, is that if they do start clawing back money from schools, the schools that are considered better funded, like the schools in your surrounding area, to me are most vulnerable to a clawback of funds. I'm not calling for that now, but it's just something to keep on your back radar at this moment in time. And then we have the uncertainty of federal sources. I've had a lot of schools who've asked me to come talk to them about what's happening at the United States Department of Education. And right now, as best we could ascertain, most of the major grants, like title grants and IDEA, which is for special ed, and school food programs, likely aren't gonna be cut, but perhaps the funds will be flowing through the states, and maybe they'll be distributed differently, but generally those funds are considered safe funds at this moment in time. The impact that I'm more concerned about is that the state of Illinois relies on the federal government as well, and they only have 28 days of reserves, which is the lowest in the country. So if they start getting a decrease in federal funding for whatever reason, then that could be something that could really accelerate their financial challenge. So now let's look at the financial forecast specific to your district. Almost 75% of your money comes from real estate taxes. So CPI, the rate of inflation, is the main driver of your revenue projection. So these are the major revenue assumptions. The first three are most relevant. First of all, last year, because Cook County was late in their taxes, 2026 was understated a bit, but that will help. 25 was understated. So some of 25 revenues, we think are going to go into 26, which would result in about a $2.8 million increase in tax revenues in 26. The core CPI that the Board of Education could work with is 2.9% for this December. It's trending 2.8% in 26, and then we're projecting it to grow at the historical average of 2.4%. The next bullet point is, and I'm going to talk about it a couple times, is the biggest uncertainty and something that the district needs to follow most closely. There's two major developments in your district. One is called the Henry at Harms Woods, and I spoke with the village of Skokie, who are very friendly, by the way, very nice people to me. That project is almost complete, and it's gonna hit the tax rolls likely in the 2026 levy, which will hit your fund balances in 28. And then the Westfield Old Orchard development, which hasn't started yet, that's expected to hit the tax rolls in 28. The 28 tax levy, which means the dollars come in the 2030 fiscal year. The next line is a high estimate that those two projects combined will generate $2 million plus in new annual tax revenues above and beyond the CPI increases. That's a very fluid number. The village doesn't know for sure either, so that's something we'll keep a close eye on.
But Rob,
Yes.
$2 million tax revenue, but how much more money would we be able to get from that $2 million?
That's the district's share.
Okay, that's the district share, right? Okay. But that's a big if it comes on like they stated that it would.
Well, the Henry and Harms, yeah, that's right. So I based that off of, the numbers came up, are based off what the Henry was estimated at before they started the project. And then the anticipation that the Westfield Old Orchard development will be larger than the Henry at Harms Woods. Okay, so interest is projected to decline, evidence-based funding, despite the fact that they're paying $4 billion more a year, since 2017, your district is projected, your district only gets about $2,000 a year. So really, your main source of revenues is real estate taxes. You're a little unique than other districts that I work with in that you have the potential of some growth beyond CPI because of these major capital projects. On the expenditure side, 65% of your budget is salaries and benefits, like most school districts, so that's the big driver of the expenditure growth. We're projecting based on projected increases to base salaries, 15 teacher retirements during the projection period, and an increase of 4 FTE in 27 due to the opening of the Early Childhood Center. We have that built into the projections. Primarily due to expected health insurance costs, we're projecting benefits to increase 5%. We have built in the budget that the district's going to spend $1.5 million on building maintenance and non-capital equipment annually beyond the current project. The district will spend $22 million to complete existing projects in FY '26 and '27 using unused bond proceeds and fund balance reserves. So that's to complete the projects that are ongoing right now. And then the district is going to taking a concerted effort to keep out-of-district student tuition flat. That's grown significantly over the last several years, which isn't unusual for school districts in Illinois. That line item has really grown post-COVID for a lot of school districts. And then all other expenses projected to increase at the rate of inflation, 2.4%. So putting it all in a blender, we're anticipating expenses to grow at an average rate of 2.9% on average. So
Robert?
if those projections hold true.
Rob?
Sorry, Rob. My name's Jeff Sturbins. I'm one of the board members. How long is the projection period?
Sure, the projection period is for this budget year plus 5 years.
Thank you.
So it goes through 2031. And this is, and based on the assumption, we are anticipating the district to have about a balanced budget in 2026, and then to have deficit spending in the $1 to $2 million range every year thereafter. And the reason why it's flat is that although your expenditure growth is projected to exceed revenue growth, the new property coming in from the two projects will help offset that and keep that deficit at a lower level and a more stable level. In terms of the impact on fund balances, in aggregate over the next through 2031, we're projecting expenses to exceed revenues by $7.3 million. We have the $22 million in capital investment. So in aggregate, we're projecting fund balances to drop by $29.3 million during the projection period, which would take your days of hand fund balances from 372 days down to 110 days. And this is what it would look like. So this is probably the last two slides are really the slides of most concern. I'll talk about that in my assumptions, but with the uncertainty that I projected or anticipating in Illinois, it's a little concerning to me that the district right now, based on the assumptions, will be falling below that 180-day target. So that's going to be part of my recommendation to try to stay above that black line if possible. Two alternate projections. So the last projections you saw, because some school districts I work with do these real worst case scenarios, and I think they're not valid because that's like under Armageddon situations what will happen. That's what you saw so far is where I feel there's a 50% probability to be better, 50% probability to be worse. That's a no bias projection. Then I put two scenarios. One is a realistic best case scenario, which would be CPI staying around 3%, That means your real estate taxes will grow faster. Annual salary growth will be 0.5% below projected growth levels. And non-capital expenditures other than salary will be 1% below projected growth levels. And on the realistic worst case, an emphasis on realistic, because there's worst case scenarios where there's a pension shift or something, that's not in our projection so far. So, but a realistic, where this could happen, worst case scenario, is that CPI could trend back down to the 2% range, which it was at before COVID. Annual salary growth is gonna end up being 0.5% higher than what we're projecting, and non-capital expenditure growth, like if out-of-district tuition can't be stabilized, for example, growing at 1% a year above the current projections. So these are the deficits / revenues under the three scenarios. So the light blue dots are what you saw earlier, that's the recurrent projection. And then you can see under the realistic best case, the district couldn't get back to surplus scenarios. And on the realistic worst case, the district could be having growing deficits at a level that would become unsustainable at some point in time. And then in terms of fund balance reserves, under all three scenarios, the district is projecting to be under that 180-day reserve level. And you can see that under the scenarios, the amount of money available depends on what happens in the future. So the recommendations that I have at this moment in time is that as fund balance reserves decline, the objective of achieving balanced budgets is heightened. So in other words, when the district had a year plus of reserves, if the district deficit spent in a year, that's not that alarming. But as school districts' fund balance reserves hover around at 180 days, if you're below that, it's more critical that you have balanced budgets to try to stay above that level. So that's a new emphasis or a heightened emphasis that I think the district needs to have now that fund balances are projected to decline. It's a recommendation that the district always look to identify operational efficiencies within the budget as the first major step to slowing expenditure growth. So as you recall, the projected deficit is $1 to $2 billion. If we want to get to a structural deficit, it makes sense now to start looking at operational efficiencies, and you're not at the point right now where you have to make decisions that could impact student learning, for example. With anticipated financial challenges, consider a policy. The district doesn't have a board policy, as I could see. Most districts do have some policy. There's pros and cons to it, but consider either a formal or informal policy to maintain fund balance reserves above the 180-day reserve level to best ensure fiscal and academic stability with all the challenges that may happen in the school district. Considering one of the ways to help address the fund balance decline. So from my perspective, what the district did to bring fund balances down was a prudent strategy. By shifting essentially the money from the bank to another investment, being your capital. I do capital investment less as an expenditure, more as an investment. If in fact it's going to take another $22 million to shore up these projects, given the challenges and given the slight structural deficit, maybe it's coming down a little too far, a little too fast. So the district should consider issuing bonds to address both current, the $22 million that's out there, and future major capital investment, issuing bonds to address those. So one of the tools the district has, as I showed, is borrowing. I know the district doesn't like to get too far ahead of its borrowings, but it's something that I think that needs to be on your menu of items to consider to keep those fund balance reserves over 180 days. So that's something I would recommend you looking at going forward. The next one's really important, and this really to me is going to be critical to define your school's future, is to monitor note that this free meeting will end in 10 minutes. So. Monitor economic development, these economic development projects. On the positive side, if you end up getting 2 million plus in revenues, and there's very few students coming out of this project, that's great. But there's about 1,000 units being built. And I know that the village has been told, and I believe the school's been told, that a lot of students are coming out of there, but 1,000 units is a lot of units. And if a lot of students come out of those units, that could have a significant impact on your district, both in terms of boundaries, figuring out the additional student and how to fit them into your buildings. And worst case scenario is that if you have to do major construction, you may have to do major construction again, if there's enough students coming out of those facilities. So that's something that we need to really closely keep an eye on. And then my final point is to make major financial decisions, to continue to do this regularly, because things are gonna change significantly, and especially in Skokie, to get ahead of your challenges. So I recommend that we do this on, at least on an annual basis, as we get more current information. So that's all I have for the financial projection part of the meeting. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
I do. Rob, it's Jeff Sturbins again. The projections of possible increases in revenue from Henry and Old Orchard. Historically, there's been a lot of talk around Old Orchard and around the region about tax incentives being given to developers to maintain the existence of malls and mixed use. Is that possibility incorporated into your model at all?
No, that would be a huge impact on this district. In fact, Kenya and I were talking yesterday or the day prior. I know they have their annual TIF meeting coming up.
Right.
I think it's very close. You need to keep a close eye on that. We're relying on those revenues without a lot of expenditure impact. So either the expenditure impact trigger, or if they did something to curtail the revenues at your school district, that would have a significant impact on these projections and are not built in to these current projections.
And when you say to keep an eye on that, I can keep an eye on it and watch them do a TIF.
Right.
Is there something more concrete?
That's right.
So is there something more concrete that you're suggesting?
No, I think that you just have to keep close communications with the village.
Okay.
From my conversation, it didn't sound, they said I talked to the finance department. The indication to me was that there was no inclination to go in that direction. But an open communication with them, letting them know how critical that lever is to your district's long-term financial stability. And then the other one was the students, just kind of monitoring, just through conversations with these developments, how many families are moving in versus empty nesters.
Thank you.
Rob, I gave you another link just in case you cut off to join.
I'll try to make my question quick. Rob, this is Katrina Bell Jordan. Over here, you can see me. I have a question on the recommendations page, and I don't think that there's a concrete answer, but it's just more of your thinking. For those districts that do already have policy around maintaining fund balances at above the 180-day reserve level, do your recommendations are in your modeling? How is your modeling and your recommendations? How are they impacted by the policies that the districts have? So, if a district has a policy to maintain a fund balance, I'm making this up, at 5% higher than the 180-day reserve level, or 8% to be, just odd. Do you fit that into your modeling, or is that just a piece of information that you know in terms of the ethic and say approach to the budgeting?
No, I think it's absolutely relevant to the projections, because I work with districts that maybe are still in a position where they have a year's worth of reserves, and they're asking me how much fund, kind of your decisions a couple of years ago. We have a $20 million project, we do it without borrowing. Well, if they have a year's worth of reserves and your fund balance policy is 180 days, that's, yes, you could do that. You're making yourself more vulnerable, but you could do that without violating your policy. And then in terms of all major decisions, there's about 4 or 5 major decisions that schools make every year. I like to view whatever line that is that you decide as almost like the $0 line. But your district to me is because, number one, you're in Cook County, so like I work with Oak Park, and because they only have 4 months, 4.5 months worth of fund balance reserves, they're right on the precipice of having to issue tax anticipation warrants to pay bills because Cook County taxes are late. So Cook County to me has a more desire to have healthy fund balances. And then I think that because your district is a tier 4 school district, considered highest funding and evidence-based funding, and my concerns about state funding in Illinois, I think that makes you more vulnerable than other schools. So I think with that future vulnerability and the uncertainty of Cook County, I think that it justifies trying to stay above that 180-day level, which is the level that ISB establishes to get their highest financial profile score. Some schools do have 6 months to 3 months worth of range, but since you're above 180 days now, ideally it would be great to make decisions to stay above that range if possible.
Thank you.
Rob, you seen the other, link?
I didn't, my full screen is being used right now, but I have 3 minutes left. Should I get off?
Yeah, and jump on the other one so we can have another 45 minutes.
Okay, I'll be on in a second.
Can I ask a question that I don't think Rob necessarily?
Sure.
So, we're in conversation about potential additional revenue through partnerships that we will talk about later. Has he done any projections with that revenue factored in?
His line that he mentioned is around maintaining what we currently have as it relates to out-of-district tuition. So his projections are forecasted status quo for
Right.
things to remain as is. So if we were to potentially start to reduce that amount of spending, it would help our projections, if that makes sense. So he gave us, when he says like a level, I think he used the line level, what he means by that is a maintaining of what we currently have, not going up, not going down.
Right, so that's the student piece and sending them over to Malloy, or an NTDSE. But if we were to rent out space or something like that and get additional revenue, has that been factored in?
That's a good question. Did you hear that at all, Rob? Welcome back.
Was there a question about student fees?
The question
No,
was,
it was-
whether and to what extent possible rental earnings would be, an impact to the projections, if that makes sense.
I work with, you could, I think I read an old email from one of your attorneys recommending that you should have conversations around possibly additional revenues tied to maybe student populations within these developments. There's some ideas around that. I work with school districts that have, they get a certain dollar amount per student. It'll be a little challenging. I think right now these are anticipated to be apartments, but there's some speculation that they might turn into condos. I don't know, and I don't know which of those two would have the higher probability of generating students. But something along the lines maybe of impact fees or something tied to students. You can be creative as you want to be if people are willing to recognize. And again, if you don't get a lot of students, this is great for the school district. Because absent that, your deficits instead of 1 to 2 million would be 3 to 4 million. But if you get a lot of students and you have to hire a few teachers, that's not a big deal. But if you get a lot of students and have to do some major construction to accommodate them, and it tips to that, that's when it becomes a challenge.
So I will say, just to add, so last year I had a lot of concern about the developments and our construction being at a point where it may have been salvageable to, add on and increase. So I reached out to Fox Valley. I reached out to school districts and school leaders in Fox Valley, Melody Farms, Hawthorne Mall, and Atworth, all of which who had over 100 units. Not as many as what's projected at Old Orchard and Henry, but for an example, Fox Valley had 300 units, fully leased for 18 months, and they had 20 students. Melody Farms had 260 units, they had 4 students. Hawthorne Mall, I don't have the unit count, but I think it was even bigger, and it had 2 students. And Atworth had 7 to 9. So if you're feeling angst around this topic, that was where I was at last year. I've come a long way, and I feel much more confident right now.
That's great. I mean, I had heard that information, and that's why we didn't build in the projections, any student growth that would impact the projections. And hopefully that's the likely scenario, but it's 1,000 units, so it's just
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
just something to keep
Yeah.
your eye on. But hopefully that's how it plays out.
I have a question. Can we compare it to what happened when the Optima Towers were built? And what impact it had on the surrounding school districts? Do we know, is it anything similar to what these 2 developments could be in terms of like revenue or students or anything?
I thought the other one wasn't all us.
Was it
Yeah,
part?
Optimum was not all
It's not all
68,
here?
yeah.
Okay.
It was a combination, I believe, between 69 and 68.
Okay.
So that break was between both schools. We can look into it, and maybe when Rob comes on in December, we can discuss that one in more detail when we do the tax rate information memo between all the other schools.
I think the challenge that Rob has pointed out is we're looking at potentially over 600 units just at the Old Orchard Mall.
Yeah,
development.
600 luxury units for the Orchard. Rob, I think Harmswood was about another 400, but some of those are rentals currently.
Mm.
And the rental price for some of those are $5,000 a month.
So we have met with the mall developers, so I think it's definitely, like you said, something we've got to stay monitoring and aware of, and we absolutely will. I just wanted to share the perspective of the other school districts that have gone through similar mixed development processes, if that's helpful.
No, that's very helpful. Yeah. And that's kind of what pulled my thought of adding adding some more teachers or an anticipated staff because of this. Under the current likely scenario that it's not going to generate a lot of students.
Me and Rob talked about maybe doing a projection in the spring when we know some more information about these developments and Harmwood being complete. Maybe we can get some more numbers. He was like, yeah, we should do some projections later on just to see if that number does dramatically change, or at least come back to the board with some additional information on that. And then the other one hasn't even started yet. It was supposed to start the spring of 26, and it did not. So they are a year behind.
And two numbers I don't know, which I think that we should know and have in the back of our mind, is how many students can we absorb within the buildings where the students would go naturally. That's one number. And then the second number would be how many students can the district itself absorb? In other words, there's one, I'm making up a number, but maybe if there's 40 kids that come out of there, they can fit right in whatever those buildings that they would feed into. And maybe we have to hire a couple teachers, but that doesn't impact our thing. But if it's more than 200 students, then we have to put additions on and things of that sort. There's 2 numbers that would be kind of good to know what our high-end targets are, and then we can compare that to what's really coming out of those developments.
Which elementary
It's
school?
between two.
So the Old
Wait.
Orchard development would
Yeah.
feed into Highland,
Okay.
and the Henry
Stenson.
would feed into Stenson.
Yes.
And I know that we've discussed the aging out of some residents that live in Stenson, in the coming decade.
Actually, To that point, what's really gonna be helpful is, in the next probably 2 months, we should have, by December, we are going to be providing data to a demographer
Yeah.
that has been contracted with 219 and is also going to be amazingly supporting the township elementary schools. So we'll hopefully have a bit more of like a bit of a cross section of where some of the density is within our boundaries. That's going to be really helpful for us as we think about some of the questions that Rob posed. So we are been asked to give that data by mid-December, so I'm hoping in the next month or two we'll be able to turn around and come back with what that looks like.
What's the flow into OOJH look like if there's an influx from this?
I think that will be the outcome of the demographer's study. We'll be able to see, what those numbers look like, and where there's capacity opportunities or challenges along the way. We know we have some already. So this has been something on the radar since last year when we met initially with the mall developers to see, for our own study, what it looks like in just our existing properties, so we have a better idea of, even if the units that get developed don't end up producing families with students, we wanna make sure that we're, every 5 to 6 years monitoring our own enrollment too. So it's perfectly timely, but we can absolutely report back to the board on that.
Kenya?
Yes.
I don't know if this is a question for you, Rob, both, but one of the primary recommendations was to identify operational efficiencies to slow expenditures. More concretely, what sorts of operational efficiencies should you and we be looking to identify and maximize?
Currently, me and Rob did talk about that. I already was in the midst of working on transportation, because transportation is already deficit spending. And, we're looking at that. We're looking at some options we have that we outsource some transportation, doing bids on those services that we have with those other vendors and try and get some better pricing. Transportation has been very tricky over the last several years. Bus drivers are hard to find. They know that, so they're asking for a lot more money in every area, aspect of that. So we're trying to look on reevaluating that, since we do service all schools, all students that are under the 1.5 miles, which we do not get state funding for. So we have to look at some other ways that can save us money in those areas, so we can still provide that service for them. We're looking about any other areas away from the classroom. We're looking at technology, trying to cut back some budgets in technology. We're looking at the food service program that does come out to bid, where we have to do that bid over again. Maybe we can cut some costs there, but we do get state funded for that. We're looking at our residency issues that we may have. We hired a new investigator for that to cut down on some of those costs. If we do have some students that do not reside in our district, since we have so many elementary schools by us, to evaluate that. I had 2 meetings with attorneys with that today, so we're looking to clean that up too. And then just trying to think of other ways, and we've been trying to think of other ways, do some sharing of services with neighboring elementaries is also a key thing we're looking at. But it's gonna take a lot to cut millions, and it will not happen in one school year. But we're starting to look at some of them that we can cut as much as possible.
Thank you.
Rob, you wanna start the other PowerPoint?
Sure.
We're gonna discuss the levy presentation, which probably won't go as long as we just did. Be short and sweet, because he did talk about some of those components in the projections. But we wanna present the tentative levy for you that we do have to finalize in December, and then we'll bring back to you the final levy. But we see that this tentative levy probably have no changes to it, so it'll be pretty much the same information we'll present in December. I told you to have this ready. We talked about this at 6 o'clock.
While Rob is getting this ready, one of the things we typically will present to you is a comparison of the other township schools as it relates to their levies and their taxes. Because of the delay in the tax bill, we don't have that data yet, but our goal for the December meeting, when you actually vote on this, will be to have that information presented as well. So this is just tentative as a tee up to December.
All right, Rob.
You that, Kaden?
Yep, we got it. We can see it. You got 30 minutes.
30.
Like
30
25.
minutes, you guys can shoot this.
Yeah.
This should be
Before you
about
cut
4
off
minutes.
again, right?
Oh.
Yeah, this should last about 4 minutes. 4 or 5
Okay, let's go.
All right, here we go. Okay, so timetable for the tax levy, tonight you're hearing the, tentative levy, which has to be, at least 20 days from when the board approves it. The plan is to approve the tax levy on December 18th, and then Kenya will file the levy, by December 30th with the Cook County clerk. This just shows that the levy is in alignment with the strategic plan goals, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, so I'm not gonna go through that, at this point. When a school district considers the levy, they need to recognize that the decision impacts the long-term financial condition of the district. It also impacts decisions on the long-term quality of the services the district provides, and an impact on the condition of the district facilities and how much they want to invest in capital facilities. About 80% of your money comes on the 2026 budget, 81% of your budget tax levies. So this is very relevant. All those other pieces of pie on the right-hand side, they don't grow. And they don't make a big percentage. So you're, unfortunately, the tax levy decision is the only decision that a Board of Education controls to increase resources to pay for growing costs of educating students. As I mentioned earlier, in Cook County, the growth minus new property is capped by the rate of inflation. For this December, the rate of inflation is 2.9%, which is the lowest it's been since 2021. The historical average is about 2.4%.
Rob, can you talk about, go back to that slide, 22 and 23, where CPI was higher than 5%, and since we're in Cook County, we could not get that money.
Sure. So the law is that you can increase your tax levy by the lesser of inflation or CPI. So it just so happens in those 2 years, lesser of CPI or 5%.
Right.
So since CPI was 7% in 2022 levy, for example, the maximum you could increase is 5%. That's why the darker part of the bar stops at 5%.
But
no matter how high inflation goes, the most you can increase the tax levy is 5%.
that's only for Cook County, so all the college schools was able to
Yeah,
get that
all
additional
the
money.
schools subject to tax caps have the same criteria.
Okay, go ahead.
And then in addition to that, schools are allowed to capture tax revenues above, any new property you can capture above CPI. You can see on the right, this is the last 10 years of new taxable property, which really isn't high for your school district. Really until these projects that are coming on now, most of the huge development happened pre-2015. There hasn't been a lot of taxable property. I don't know if you have, someone was talking about tax incentives. I don't know if there's property built here that's been built in those areas, but this is taxable property. And it's been relatively low for 2022. The rule of thumb for your district is that for every $1 million in new property equalized assessed valuation, which equals about $3 million in market value. So every $3 million of market value property generates about $25,000 of additional revenue to your school district. It's not a lot on a per million basis. For the 2025 levy, new taxable property is estimated at $4 million. That would generate approximately $100,000 of revenues above the 2.9% CPI. The tax levy that we put together represents a 4.9% increase above prior year extension. Most school districts, even though they know their cap is 2.9, levy higher than that because only in Cook County do we not know what new taxable property is? We don't even have an idea. So, the 4.9% does not mean that it's gonna cost taxpayers any more. It's just that this would allow the district to, the current taxpayers are gonna increase by 2.9%. The 4.9 request will allow us to capture new property dollars, in the event that something happens that we're not, aware of. That maybe, for example, and this was in Kenya in my mind, is that if a portion of the first project, which is supposed to hit the tax rolls in '26, if the county accelerates some of it, since a lot of it's been built already, into this tax bill. So that's why we have a 4.9 request, but we don't capture that money unless the new property is there. Part of what schools are required to do now is called Public Act 103-0394. This is where you have to compare your last 3 years' expenditures in your operating funds, which is defined as education, operations, maintenance, and transportation, and compare it to fund balance reserves. So your average expenditures for those 3 years was $37,695,000. Your fund balances in those operating funds was $34,364. So in terms of a ratio, your fund balances represented 91.2% of your average annual expenditures for those 3 funds. And that's it. 1.5 minutes. So, any questions?
All right, Rob,
Any more? Yes.
they have no questions for you.
Great for you. I will use the one. All right, so I look forward to meeting you all in person, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
I have a question for us. We know the village is going through a strategic planning process right now. They just did a survey in August. Are we involved in that? Part of it's economic vitality. Like, do schools sit in on the village plan for economic vitality? It impacts us so directly.
That's a good question. I go to the TIF related meetings. I get an invite too. I have not.
I'd imagine they're
Strategic
focusing
planning.
most on like 69, the
Mhm.
downtown area, but Old Orchard is such a big deal.
Yeah.
It would make sense that there's something, I'd like to know what their plans are, because they affect us so much.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Yeah,
for sure.
that'd be interesting.
We may not know how much is public facing yet for their strategic plan.
It's very preliminary, that's why I was like,
Yeah,
it's
so
early enough for us to be like,
Yeah,
Can
we
we
may
know?
not be able to glean too much until they push out some where they are public facing, but I think that's a good question. The question is being invited to the table.
yes,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think we can figure
Yeah.
something.
I was gonna say, I think we would be okay.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd be welcoming. Yeah, we have a regularly scheduled TIF meeting. I was just looking to see when the next is. Because I know that was mentioned a little bit too, but I hope Rob's, he really did apologize for not being able to come in person, but as I mentioned to you before, hopefully you feel like it was digestible and gave some helpful visuals. We've done, the best we can last year with some of the work from the past. It's just helpful to, I think, have a little bit more of that outside perspective as well. But I do want to just assure everyone, we have really been watching the mall development for really since July 1 of 2024. We really hit that head on last year, meeting with the mall developers, working with our legal counsel to get ahead of any sort of possible changes that may be taking place, thinking about financial implications of it, the mall outreach as well. So it does feel still very much to be determined, but we're going to continue to monitor it. And I think the demographic study is a great next step that we needed anyway, and mentioned prior to the community that we would be looking into that. So I just wanted to emphasize those 3 pieces because I think they'll be critical for us and just long-term planning and making sure our schools continue to thrive the way they are. So we'll stay on it so you don't have to worry about it as much as we do.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, Dr. Samajani, it's a long night. Student achievement report.
45-minute.
Listen,
I've never
no,
presented
right?
from the podium, so I'm gonna
Wait,
like,
really?
I'm gonna go crazy and stand here tonight.
This is an anomaly. We're going back to our 45-minute meetings, I promise.
We'll have you 45 minutes.
But I do appreciate Dr. Samajani presenting this evening. This is an annual report as well. We have adjusted it both last year and this year a little bit to just continuously adapt it. I won't take away too much from you because I've already looked at it. It's a great one.
Thank you. So our alignment is to obviously the teaching and learning strand of our strategic plan goal. So I will be talking tonight about the Illinois School Report Card and those summative components and weights that make up our summative designations in terms of academic indicators and also the other indicators that fall within that. So for 2025, there were some changes made to proficiency benchmarks for English language arts and math proficiency on the IR. And then also science proficiency for the ISA. I'll get into more of those changes in the next few slides. But those did come into play in the summative weights that were part of the algorithm for summative designations. All of this to say as well that ISB is redesigning the entire accountability system for next year. So it will be very different. It will be much simpler. There will still be indicators, but there will no longer be weights or points, anything in that regard. So it should be much easier to understand, but again, it will just be another new thing for everyone to get used to next year, which is a little par for the course. So just a little bit of information I always share about our students. This is kind of a look over time at our diversity of student race and ethnicity. We have a little bit of an increase in our total enrollment from last year, a little bit of a decrease in our white subgroup of students, and a little bit of an increase in our 2 or more race. Some additional student demographics, our mobility is down a little bit, and I think we're seeing that a little bit in action with fewer move-in families as we had seen previous to 2025. Other than that, everything's kind of about status quo, staying about the same over the last couple of years. So to share with you the academic indicators, as you know, we take the Illinois Assessment of Readiness and the ISA. IAR is for our 3rd through 8th grade students tested in math and ELA, and then ISA is our science assessment given in grades 5 and 8. So here are some of the points that I wanted to just make sure that you knew about the proficiency changes. So ISB has done a lot of communication about this whole process, the 18 months that they went through to kind of determine where Illinois fell in regard to comparing to all other states across the country. And they have made the decision to right size our proficiency scores, our proficiency cut scores, so that they are in better alignment to real college and career expectations. So some of the notable facts about the IR is that benchmarks for English language arts proficiency for Illinois were the most restrictive in the country. Benchmarks for 4th grade math in particular were the most difficult to reach in the nation. And this is kind of what you were referring to a little bit earlier, right? And our proficiency benchmarks ranked in the top 4 most restrictive in every other grade and subject. So our kids really were being held to much, much more rigorous standards than students around the country. And so it looked as if our students were not performing as well as other students around the country. And it was simply the nature of the cut scores that were determined by Illinois a number of years ago. And so right sizing those is going to help us show what our students are actually doing in classrooms. So something to know about the ISA, those benchmarks were too low. And so it was really, those proficiency scores were really overstating student mastery. And the other piece to know about ISA is that performance levels also were described very differently than IR. You either met expectations or you didn't meet expectations. There were two performance levels for ISA. So now they are going to be in line with IAR. All four, both assessments will have the same 4 proficiency levels. And here they are. So you can see them there, below proficient, approaching proficient, proficient, and above proficient, with cut scores for each of those. This slide just talks a little bit about what a performance level is and then what proficiency means. Here is a chart showing the actual old cut scores compared to the new ones. So you can see that cut scores for ELA and math are now lower than they were previously. You also will notice that the old cut scores for ELA and math were the same regardless of grade level. So they were 750. That was the cut score. Didn't matter what grade you were in. Now there is variation within that, again, to align better to college and career readiness. And then science cut scores have increased, and interestingly enough, they are both at 812, just like they were at 799. So just a couple of things to know, some kind of big implications of the 2025 changes. There are large variations in rigor across grade levels and subjects, and those range anywhere from the 45th national percentile to the 69th percentile. So that conversation that we were having about 4th grade, like this is an example of that. So there is going to be a varying level of rigor. We are expected to see a steady drop in math proficiency across grades 3 through 8 over time. And that is unrelated to how our students are performing, how our school's performing, how our district is performing. And that is a true statement across the state. So our 3rd graders are we're going to show math proficiency, and then our 4th graders, and as they move along in the grade levels, those proficiency levels are going to drop because the levels of rigor are increasing. Does that make sense?
I can wait till the end.
Okay. And then we also will expect to see ELA proficiency to be significantly higher compared to math, despite the new proficiency scores making us equally competitive compared to the state and to the nation. So here is proficiency for ELA, math, and ISA by grade level. And again, because cut scores were changed for 2025, we cannot compare our proficiency rates to 2024 or any previous year, as these scores will now serve as the new baseline. So you can see that our ELA proficiency is higher than our math, as they indicated we would most likely see. Here is that information by subgroup. So you can see how our all student group is performing, our English learners, our students with IEPs, and our students that are designated as low income. So IR also gives us growth percentile for our students, and these are the growth percentiles over the last 4 years. The growth percentile metric did not change, and so we are able to compare the 2025 growth percentile to the previous years, which is why you see some history on the data here. So even though our ELA proficiency was higher than our math proficiency, our math growth is higher than our ELA. And here's that same information by subgroup. So another academic component that goes into the summative designation is around access scores, in particular the progress to proficiency that students are making. So as you know, WIDA Access for ELLs is administered to all of our English learners, kindergarten through 8th grade. They exit the program when they reach a composite score of 4.8, and they are tested in 4 different domains. So just some historical data here. The chart on the right is showing you our percent of multilingual learners over the last 9 years. We continue to grow steady-ish around the same mark as 2024, but over time our population has increased. The information on the left is showing you our EL exit rate. This past year we had an exit rate of 10.4% compared to the state's 7.1%. And then you can see historically where we were the last 2 previous school years. This chart is showing you how students are performing across all of the bands in access. So students who are just entering the language acquisition phase to students who are reaching more of a monolingual status. All right, so that was the academic components. Next, we're going to talk about school quality and student success indicators. One of those indicators is chronic absenteeism. So for 2025, we had an 18.5% rate of students missing 10% or more of the school year. That is 10% absences, whether they are excused, unexcused, vacation, sick, whatever the reason might be. It is literally just if they were absent from school or not. The state rate was 25.4%. So we are below the state there, but we are continuing to monitor this information and look to see how we can improve on this. It is a statewide issue, so that piece is something that we're continuing to focus on. To let you know what next year will look like, they are flipping this and they're going to talk about, they're going to rephrase it from chronic absenteeism to school attendance, and they're going to report based on the percentage of a school that has 90% or more attendance rate. So they're kind of flipping the narrative on that and focusing on the positive instead of on absenteeism. So the next component is our 5 essentials, our climate survey. There are 5 essentials, and of those, 2 of them stood out as being areas where we had some good growth around ambitious instruction and supportive environment. Both of those were areas where we had some school improvement goals established, and so we had some nice growth in both of those areas, which we're happy about. So all of that together is data that is used to determine a school's summative designation. There are 5 different summative designations from exemplary to intensive. You can see our designations here. We're very proud of Highland for having an exemplary designation, meaning that their overall performance for their all student group was in the top 10% of the schools. So a hearty congratulations to Highland and Dr. Bradley and all of the work. Also, our Stinson and our Old Orchard schools received the commendable designation. About 70% of the state falls within the commendable designation. So we are equally proud of them as well. And Devonshire did receive a targeted support designation this year. And it was a particular subgroup of students that was highlighted by the state. And that subgroup was the Children with Disabilities Act. looking at Devonshire's overall summative designation score, they were in that commendable range, right alongside Stinson and Old Orchard. Again, it was just one subgroup of students whose performance put us in that targeted designation group. So equally proud of Devonshire and all of the work that they do to support their students. So what does that mean for Devonshire? They will enter a 4-year school improvement planning status required by ISB. This year is a planning year, and the next 3 years following that would be implementation years. The school will remain in this status regardless of how their designation might change next year. The state wants you to stay in that so that you continue to get the funding that comes along. You can see the dollar amounts that will be received each year, but also just to sustain the work. They know that just having a plan for 1 year and then abandoning it doesn't make a lot of sense. So 4 years is the plan. Part of the work that will come next for us is developing a school leadership team who will focus specifically on developing a school improvement plan that is submitted to you as a school board and then to ISB for their approval. Part of that work will involve completing a school-based needs assessment, digging into data, kind of trying to identify some root causes for maybe why that particular subgroup might need some support in specific areas. And we will know that once we have dug into that data and completed that rather lengthy needs assessment that comes along. It's a pretty time intensive, but it will give us a lot of really great information.
Really quick, just so the board knows, we talked about as they develop the school plan, having consistent check-ins for us to know how they're progressing along their plan. So just wanted to tell you, it's already been put into the calendar for next year.
I just, before you go too much further, I don't know how to say this in public. Those dollars, in the scheme of things,
Yes.
are not a huge amount of dollars for each year. Okay, so hang on. It's okay that I said that out loud. Okay.
I don't think it's
Yeah. Having said that, how do you, I assume that the school leadership team and the school-based needs assessment will determine how those modest but important dollars are distributed. Do you go into this having a sense of like big categories, you know, is that professional development or, you know, is that teaching and learning tools? Is that, you know, other infrastructure improvements? Do you just have big picture ideas of like what those dollars would be used for?
You do, and it's, Brian and I actually attended a workshop today put on by ISB for newly designated schools, and we talked through some of the allowable expenses. And we were commenting that the planning year is the year that you receive the most money, and it sort of seems like, you know, you don't quite know yet how to spend the money right now until you've gotten into the work. The school improvement plan actually doesn't even have to be submitted to ISB until June. So they want you thinking now how to spend that $36,000 as part of planning, and they give you some big buckets. So PD would be one, curriculum materials would be another, partnering with an approved learning partner might be another. So bringing someone in who can kind of give you maybe an outside perspective on maybe things that you know you're not as privy to, because you know that you're in the forest, can't see the trees for the forest kind of situation. So those are all things that are appropriate to spend on. We just have to kind of nail down where we think we need to go with it. And just so you know, I know 36,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but last year it was 10,000.
Oh.
So they really
They gave us a little more.
yeah, they really boosted it. And then, of course, we also have our own title funds that we're able to use to supplement anything that we need to do for the school. Sure. Okay, so all that information, what are we doing with it? We are celebrating our increases in math and ELA growth from last year. We are celebrating our growth in the 5 E's, 2 components that I spoke about. We also had more family participation in the 5 E's than we've had in the past, so that was great to see. Opportunities that exist for us include having a continued focus on our multilingual learners, something that is already underway. I spoke about that was it last month or in September when I had my Ed Services presentation to you. Also continuing to look at our children with disabilities, even though Devonshire was the school that had that group highlighted by ISB. If you look at our overall data, we have work to do with that group at every school. So continuing to kind of think about both of those groups of students alongside all of our students with IR. And then also we will continue to focus on ambitious instruction and supportive environment, and then that chronic absenteeism piece that I spoke about. Those are things that are not just going to go away because we had an increase in results on the survey. So how does this align to strategic plan that is already underway? We continue to do things like have our district SMART improvement plan. We have school improvement teams that meet monthly with principals. Our instructional support team continues to meet weekly at their buildings. We continue to have district-wide meetings where we're calibrating on practices across the district. Continuing to work on MTSS development and implementation. We have 2 instructional planning days per year so that teachers can dig into that local data and think about how to move instruction forward based on that. They also have 4 to 5 kid days per year so that they can dig into data on specific kids and moving groups of kids forward with interventions. Professional learning obviously continues to be a focal point with 48 days of embedded math PD for kindergarten through 8 this year, 23 days of embedded science PD for our 3 science teachers at the elementaries. And then human resources, the allocation of multilingual specialists at each building this year has been instrumental in helping us move that instruction forward with those students and the teachers that serve them. And then also in addition of a special ed resource teacher at Devonshire, knowing that Devonshire needed to have that additional resource to continue moving them forward. So those are all the pieces that are just kind of continually in play and that we're thinking about as we think through how to support the schools and in alignment to our strategic plan.
I have a question. I don't remember exactly what slide it was, but essentially that there's growth until 4th grade and then you expect it to go down, if I understand correctly.
Yes,
So what,
in math proficiency.
so I understand all the different testing and their biases and issues and all of that, but what, at the end of the day though, this is still what we're being measured against and we are significantly below a lot of other places. So what is the plan to change that expectation of like, we're gonna go low instead of like, we don't expect that, we're gonna start going higher? Like, what's the strategy there?
Well, I mean, our strategy is always to do the best that we can for our students. So we've brought back math professional development for our elementaries. And we have not had that as a focal point in a number of years, so we've brought that back. And that was before we knew that cut scores were changing and that ISB was saying you should probably expect to see your proficiency scores decrease every year. So that was an automatic, plan, strategic action that we put into place. So I think we have to see how the data falls with these new cut scores and how kids are actually going to respond to those, to see if their projections for this are going to be actualized. And I think that we look at our internal data, we look at our iReady data, we look at our common assessments in math, and we use that to help guide decision making and actions that we take around math instruction. We're not just gonna like say.
Oh, I know. I'm not saying that at all. I just want to know like what that actually will look like, because it's like very abstract. That's all.
Could you go to slide
Yeah.
15, Christy, with the the growth percentiles by year? Keep going. That one.
That one.
One more. So because of the renorming, I know this was already mentioned, but this is really the only way of looking at the data this year that you can look longitudinally from over time. So I just want to highlight there is growth and progress being seen, especially if you look at 2022 to 2025, even in math. So because they renormed and they changed things, the proficiency data is really not helpful for us to look year to year, but this one is. This actually does give us a little bit of an idea of whether and to what extent we're growing and where we need to improve. So there's definitely room to celebrate, but as you point out, definitely room for us to keep focus. So I just want to emphasize that we really do have some growth that's taking place, but obviously we want to continue to improve. So just wanted to give an extra commercial on that side.
Thank you. Yeah. We love you, Christy. I wasn't saying it.
Any other questions?
The only thing I just wanted to add for you as a board to just be mindful of, we talk at our annual retreats about, how does the board support and help in situations like this? And one of the ways is frankly staffing. So last year, the board approved 8 additional positions that didn't exist prior, 6 of which were language related and 2 of which were special education related. One of those special education roles is at Devonshire. So there is a board element to supporting the work and helping us steer in the right direction. The other piece that, and I'm really even just bringing up an ISB document, is on monitoring progress. So we now will need to bring back to you the plan, but we want to update you with that along the way throughout either way. But also, and not to just kind of keep echoing it and putting all of the eggs in one basket, but the strategic plan process is going to be critically important. We are not fraudulently going through this. We would not spend that amount of time and funding and support and resources on it. This plan will have goals built out of it, and many of those goals will be monitored throughout the next year, if not more than that, as the length of the plan comes out. So I share that as a additional point of emphasis to make sure that everyone has involvement in the development of that plan, so that everyone's time is well spent and that our resources are aligned to the plan as well. So that really will be a lot of the board's work, is checking in, holding me accountable, monitoring the progress of our strategic plan goals as they're built. But it all ties together, and there is a lot more board support and strategy and direction in that lever, if you will, than it might seem often. So if you're feeling like you want to do something, or you're, how can I as a board member, help support this work? A lot of it is already happening with the staffing piece from last year, but then the strategic plan will be critical for the staff to see that alignment between conversations and decisions that happen in the boardroom that impact the actual classroom and our students and staff as well. So another commercial, if you will, but I think it's important to just, we started the night talking about the strategic plan, talked about budget, talked about achievement. They all coexist and are definitely through line through each of those. So couldn't help myself, sorry.
IASB.
For that reminder.
ISB resolution, sorry, okay. So we talked a little bit about this earlier. No, it's okay. So no one had any objection to the resolutions that were presented from ISB. I've talked to Jeremy, and we're going to send those responses and our district's stance on that to ISB. One of the things that they are going to be taking a vote on this weekend is absentee ballot voting for ISB procedures, because they always have it on a Saturday or a Sunday, and a lot of people can't make it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that ballot measure. But I'll share the results that we have and keep you posted if I hear back.
All the other edits are really about the structure of the board of IASB itself and procedural pieces.
Awesome. Next one up, we've got Board of Education policy, first reading. I will go through the names of these. If you have any issues along the way, just let me know. I'll do a couple of highlights throughout. 2120, board member development, minimal policy and footnote changes. The one point to mention, you'll see ripple throughout a few of these, is that the state recently allowed for the removal of student growth from teacher evaluations. As a district, we did utilize that opportunity, and we did remove student growth from our teacher as well as our school leader evaluations. But you'll see that show up in a few of these. 2150, committees, minor adjustments, things related to policy and footnotes, no major changes. 2270, discrimination and harassment on the basis of race, color, and national origin prohibited. We've seen this policy in the last year and a half come through on updates. There is a new training guidance model that the IDHR has rolled out related to the Racism Free Schools Act. We have elements of that training in our GCN modules, and as I mentioned earlier tonight, we're looking at additional professional development opportunities. We already have a ton of great work taking place in elementaries as well as the junior high, but always a focus on that given our diversity as well as our focus on equity, inclusion, diversity throughout the district. 310, goals and objectives, again, student growth piece is showing up in that. 350, administrative personnel other than the superintendent. Again, student growth piece. 360, administrative responsibility of the building principal. They have just minor footnotes and updates. There is some additional information requiring notification of gun violence threats that may occur on school grounds. There's already some evidence and examples of that in existing policies. They just emphasized it even further. 410, fiscal and business management. This is requiring districts to post their statement of affairs online by December 1st. 430, revenue and investments. No major changes there. 480, accounting and audits. This requires our annual financial report and audit to be submitted to the regional superintendents by October 15th. We're unable to do that right now because we don't have the tax finalization information, but we will do that along with all the other school districts as soon as we have it. 4110, transportation. There's a little bit of an update here in a footnote related to the requirement of seatbelts on newly purchased school buses by year 2031. Just so you know, all of our school buses do have seatbelts, and that is it on the policies. Any questions, anything on those?
All right, we are going to do the approval. The next item of business is the semi-annual review of closed session minutes. May I have a motion?
I move that the board approve the recommended actions regarding the closed session minutes as presented in accordance with the semi-annual review.
Second.
Roll.
Yes.
Shear.
Yes.
Sturbins.
Yes.
Worshaw.
Yes.
Bell Jordan.
Yes.
Lonegro.
Yes.
Thank you.
The next item of business is the approval of the 2026-2027 school calendar. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the 2026-2027 school calendar as presented.
Second.
No major adjustments from when we brought it to the last meeting. First day of student attendance will be August 24th, 2026. Last day, Friday, June 4th, assuming no emergency day closures. Only real change is some adjustments with parent-teacher conferences occurring on the same evening. And there is a election day that is off within that particular calendar year, and I apologize, the day is escaping me. But that's it on the calendar.
Shear.
I actually have a question. sorry. The Skokie Park District usually revolves around the school calendar when they start camp. I'm assuming that they're not gonna start on the 7th of June.
There is some discussion on this. I don't have the details. I'm happy to follow back up, but this
Okay.
was flagged by another Skokie Elementary School district as well as a possible challenge. I'm happy to contact them and work through any sort of updates or adjustments.
Okay.
though.
I don't, cause it fluctuates like based off of other schools
Yeah,
too, but I know it does work off of all of the Skokie schools. Are we in line?
We do try to follow. We actually have calendar, like written calendar guidance that we try to follow with as much synchronicity if you can. It does change at times for certain school districts based on local needs, but for example, this 26-27 calendar is pretty tightly aligned to 219 as it relates to spring break. So there would be multiple schools that would likely be impacted if we had a snow day
Yeah.
that pushed us to the 7th.
Right.
So I think the park district will be flexible with that, but I'll definitely communicate with them.
When we plan this, do you also, I know we funnel into 219, but are we ever talking with, 73 and a half and?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do we usually end approximately on the same date, or is it kind of?
There's some nuances from district to district, but we do share our calendars. Ours is the best, ironically. It just kind of happens that way. But we do definitely try to share notes and suggestions and feedback. Jokes aside.
Because my assumption is that if another school is ending the week of the 7th, that obviously the camps won't start
Yeah.
until the week of the 14th.
But we'll reach out to them either way.
Yeah.
And we'll flag it just because it is kind of button up, like you said, to when they may start.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Because there was a couple districts were struggling to finish on the Friday, which is why it came up, and they were like worried.
Yeah.
What would that look like? We have an e-learning plan developed now. We did a little bit of PD on that as well this year, so there's increased likelihood of that. We're building out a weather section of the website that will roll out in the next few days that really explains kind of why and how. We mentioned a traditional school day, a traditional snow day, because it was going to be on a Monday, so we had some device issues there. But that's another option to help us maintain this calendar as well, possibly.
Yes.
Good question.
Servant,
Yes.
Portia,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Lonigro,
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
All right, the next item of business is the approval of the Skokie 68 proclamation commitment to belonging. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the Skokie 68 proclamation commitment to belonging as presented.
Second.
So I just have a brief introduction, and then Board President Annie Warshaw will share a little bit about the proclamation and its reading of it. So the vision of Skokie School District is as follows. District 68 strives to be a learning community that inspires our students' fullest academic and human potential, encourages continuous improvement, and contributes positively to our diverse multicultural society. In its November 3rd, 2025 meeting, the Village of Skokie Board of Trustees approved an amendment to Chapter 58, Article 1, Section 58.8 of the Skokie Village Code, affirming Skokie's commitment to inclusion and strengthening Chapter 58. In alignment with this village commitment, Skokie School District 68 has prepared a proclamation commitment to belonging, affirming the district's values, policies, administrative procedures, and commitment to fostering a welcoming, inclusive, and safe learning environment for every student, every family, and every staff member.
And now I'm gonna read the proclamation. All right. Affirming Skokie School District 68's commitment to belonging, inclusion, safety, and respect for all students, families, and staff. Whereas Skokie School District 68 is committed to fostering a welcoming, inclusive, and safe learning environment for every student, family, and staff member, regardless of race, national origin, immigration status, religion, gender, or any other protected characteristic. And whereas the district upholds the values of fairness, equity, and respect consistent with its board's policies, including but not limited to Board Policy 830, which is visitors to and conduct on school property, Board Policy 710, which is equal educational opportunities, Board Policy 130, School District Philosophy, Board Policy 520, which is Workplace Harassment Prohibited, and Board Policy 810, Community Relations Connection with the Community. Now, therefore, Skokie School District 68 hereby establishes the following provisions as part of its administrative procedures and operational practice. Section 1, prohibited activities. District staff, contractors, and volunteers shall not grant access to any school building, campus, or district-owned property for civil immigration enforcement purposes, including staging, operations, debriefing, or processing without prior authorization from the superintendent and presentation of a valid criminal warrant. Number 2, share or disclose student or family or staff information, including immigration status, address, or personal identifiers with federal immigration authorities, except as required by law. Inquire into a record, a student or family's immigration status unless explicitly required by a law or court order. Section 2, notification and protocol. Any district employee who becomes aware of federal immigration enforcement activity or requests for information pertaining to the school or district shall, 1, immediately notify their school principal or direct supervisor. 2, the principal or supervisor shall promptly inform the superintendent or designee for review and direction. B, the superintendent shall maintain internal procedures aligned with board policy and the Illinois School Code to ensure a consistent response, legal compliance, and protection of student privacy. Section 3, commitment to a safe and welcoming environment. The district reaffirms that all individuals are entitled to access to education. No student shall be denied enrollment or participation based on actual or perceived immigration status. Privacy and dignity. The district will not collect or maintain records related to immigration or citizenship status except when required by law. Freedom from discrimination or harassment. All schools will maintain environments that are free from intimidation, threats, or bias. Community services and support. The district shall continue collaborating with school agencies, including the Village of Skokie, to share Know Your Rights materials and support services for families. Section 4, implementation and communication. The superintendent shall develop administrative procedures reflecting these principles, provide relevant staff with training on district administrative procedures, and disseminate information to family in multiple languages about their rights and the district's commitment to inclusion and safety. Section 5, affirmation. Affirmation? Oh, okay. This ordinance affirms Skokie School District 68's ongoing dedication to creating a safe, equitable, and inclusive educational environment where all students, families, and staff are welcome, respected, and valued. This is now adopted by the Board of Education of Skokie School District 68 on November 20th, 2025.
Stebbins?
Absolutely, yes.
Warshaw?
Yes.
Jordan?
Yes.
Lonegro? Yes, yes. Roth?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
I just want to say I'm really proud of our district because I've seen other ones, and this is like the most thorough proclamation that there is that actually defines what we can and can't do, which if we're trying to provide safety and security to a community, the more information that we legally can provide, the better. So major props to Dr. Grenz and his team because it truly is a standout document. All right. The next item of business is entering into closed session of the board. May I have a motion?
I move to enter into closed session for the following items. There's just one. The setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the public body. 5 Illinois or ILCS 120/2C6.
Second.
Jordan?
Yes.
Lonegro?
Yes.
Roth?
Yes.
Shear?
Yes.
Stebbins?
Yes.
Warshaw?